In the early hours of March 26, 2024, the MV Dali, a container ship bound for Sri Lanka, issued a Mayday call. The 300-metre ship, travelling at a speed of around 8 knots, which is about 9 miles an hour, clashed into the central support pier of the Francis Scott Key Bridge. It brought down nearly 2 miles of steel into the ocean. There were 6 construction workers working on the bridge at the time, filling potholes, who tragically lost their lives. The casualties have been estimated to have cost within the region of $2 to $4 billion, shutting down one of America's busiest ports, at a cost to the local region of over $15 million a day. That eclipses the Costa Concordia incident of a few years prior and makes it the most expensive marine insurance event in history. So ship owners turn to multiple different types of insurance to cover the whole cargo and machinery, but for extreme casualties like this, they turn to something called protection and indemnity insurance, P&I insurance. And this is effectively a pooling of resources and a sharing of risk, which ship owners do to protect one another from unimaginable events like this. Now, you're probably thinking, well, the Dali wasn't a cyber attack, and you'd be correct, although it was heavily rumoured to have been at the time. And I don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that something as tragic as this could actually happen as a result of a cyber attack and impact human lives, and we hope that is not the case, clearly. But a mechanical failure, which this was, and a cyber attack have many things in common. The failure is systemic, widespread, unpredictable, and deeply interconnected. And that's the link that I want to draw today. A cyber attack is effectively a single control failure that causes catastrophic, cascading consequences across systems, sectors, and societies. And both remind us that resilience isn't about avoiding disruption, it's about being able to anticipate, contain it, and recover stronger. True resilience in this day and age, I truly believe this, has now become about getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. So I'm Declan Burke. I've worked in business technology roles for the last 20 years. In the last 10 years, I've moved more towards sort of security and resilience roles. I'm now the head of enterprise resilience for North Standard. We're a leading marine insurer based just across the River Tyne, literally just across the River Tyne, within heckling distance, I'm told. When I heard that the future of cybersecurity was coming to Newcastle, I knew I had to be part of it. For over 2 centuries, the Tyne has been at the heart of British shipbuilding, a hub of innovation and craftsmanship. And in a funny way, today we're still building vessels, albeit they are digital ones. And like the shipbuilders of old, we are in charge of making that those vessels can withstand any storm. And on the topic of storms, I believe we're living through the perfect storm, a time when threat, technology, and regulation collide. But there is good news. Conditions for change have never been better. I believe that everybody in this room is fantastically positioned to help shape stronger, more resilient security strategies across British and global industries. And we are starting to see some improvements. I was particularly impressed with the actions of the National Cybersecurity Centre recently, who wrote to the CEOs of the FTSE 350 companies, imploring that they put cybersecurity as a board-level prerogative and asking them to focus and prepare their back-to-pen and paper strategies. They've developed excellent board governance frameworks, which I'd highly recommend you look at if you haven't already. And they're encouraging that firms push for cyber essentials to be implemented through their supply chains. A recent EY report confirmed how 52% of new executive and non-executive directors in financial services have now been hired with technology experience. This is up from 36% last year. And encouragingly, 62% of those are women, which goes to show that the leadership diversity gap is hopefully starting to close. And I was personally pleased to see that insurance is leading the pack in this respect, which is a real turning of the tide. But the seas are still rough. We've heard today from George and Lucy that AI is both a weapon and a tool. We're seeing continued cases of security teams being buried in IT, often being seen as a compliance tool and not in any way strategic. And as we'll hear from Kevin in the next talk, burnout is real. This is an industry where there's continual pressure, often very little recognition, and we are often dealing with invisible victories. The Aon annual risk report I like to read, and each year it's the same old story. Cyber attacks, business interruption, supply chain impact. Hot off the press within the last hour. Has everyone heard? Cloudflare, ChatGPT and X have been down. Spotify offline. Literally within the last hour. I think it's just come back online in the last 10 minutes. So this is crazy, right? Within the last 2 weeks, we've seen AWS, Azure, and now Cloudflare. As Will mentioned, nationally critical incidents in the UK have doubled in the past year to 200. And all whilst regulators continue to pile on more and more layers of frameworks and compliance overheads. Budgets are still constrained. And interestingly, I don't see a huge uptick in demand in terms of hiring senior cyber leadership roles. You know, theoretically, our phones should be ringing off the hook, right? I mean, they are. It's just Darktrace trying to sell us stuff. But if you're lucky enough to have a CISO, they can often be brought in as a compliance tick box, and they will often have the accountability, but without the authority. So to summarise, we are sailing into heavier weather, and too many firms continue to keep the CISO below deck. I believe that if we want to survive a storm, we've got to bring the captain to the bridge. So when I was researching for this talk, I listened to a number of podcasts. One that really got my attention was, I think it was called A Professional CISO, and it was with Joe Sullivan, who was the former CISO of Uber and Facebook Meta. And he's famous for other reasons, which I won't go into now, but he's a particularly interesting chap. And he got to about an hour into this talk, and he said, look, I was in London 2 or 3 weeks ago, and the guys in the UK, he says, are talking about organisational resilience. That's their number one priority. And he said, we need more of this. And it was. I had to go back and listen to it again, because I was at that table with him in London at that time, and we had this exact conversation. And of course, he went on to talk about Jaguar Land Rover and M&S, and we went on to talk about how the role of the CISO is changing from, you know, keeping data in the walls or building higher walls to being one where there's significant opportunity for a CISO to step up based on the fact that risk has gone through the roof. And he said something really interesting. Before I share that with you, I will share some other things that he has mentioned during this conversation. He talks, actually, if you get a chance to listen to him talking about his appointment for when he was at Uber, he took the role based on wanting to work directly for the CEO. And that was one of his negotiation tactics when he came across. He'll talk about CISOs with MBAs. He will talk about the future of the CIO role and how in Silicon Valley the CISO is actually rising above the CIO role in terms of prominence based on the commoditization of technology. What he said to me, which I want to share with you now, was really quite interesting. We talked about the NIST life cycle, you know, identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. And he's adamant almost that we should be spending less time on the first half of it, really, protect, detect, probably 30% of our time there, and 70% of our time on response and recovery. And I said, well, you know, why is that, Joe? He said, because breaches are inevitable. And, you know, that was quite interesting. And he did go on to kind of try and drive that home by saying, look, well, how do we measure success? If our security budgets are doubled and we get to the end of the year and nothing happens, is that success? Are we going to get thanked? Are we going to get a big bonus? You answer that question. But if we get breached, does that mean we've failed? Does that mean we've wasted our money? Of course not. And it kind of culminates in this, this quote, really. Like, firms are not judged on whether we can avoid an attack, but on how well we can withstand and recover from one. And that is the essence of enterprise resilience, the ability to anticipate, withstand, respond, and adapt to minimize impact and recover stronger. If you think about this, you'll do things differently. And I think that this is a famous quote, obviously, but the sentiment is particularly applicable in what I'm about to say. Resilience sits at the heart of modern enterprise, and I see CISOs as being at the forefront of evolution. We're seeing more and more regulation pushing broader scope across resilience and risk. DORA, UK dual regulation, SS121, APRA CPS 230, all expanding from cyber into full operational resilience. The UK Cyber Resilience Bill is the new one. And we shouldn't see this as compliance, we should see this as strategic opportunity. These frameworks speak the board's language: continuity, impact, recovery, value protection. And we, as security leaders, need to see this as an opportunity to step up in the context of enterprise resilience, expanding our influence from technology to the full ecosystem of business operations. And to do that, I think we need to build muscles in effectively in three new areas. And the first one might not come as a great surprise, but we really do need to start understanding our businesses. And this means becoming very intimate with business process, dependencies, critical and important functions, and impact tolerances. Now, anyone that works in financial services will be familiar with operational resilience frameworks, where we are asked to specifically prescribe what that means in terms of impact to the firm, to the customer, and to the wider market. That's table stakes now. Strengthening the supply chain governance. Our suppliers' resilience needs to be our resilience. You all have heard the term, you cannot outsource accountability. I was at a conference a few months ago, and there was a CISO from a big television network saying, we've had 2 breaches this year, and they were with suppliers we didn't even know about. It's crazy. And thirdly, we need to become crisis leaders, but not in the sense of IT incidents. I'm talking about events that cut across the whole enterprise. Our name should be the first name that people think of when the proverbial hits the fan. And we need to be in a position to be able to step up and become leaders at that point. Whether it's technology initiated, the outcome and the overall situation is going to be more than technology. When CISOs evolve into enterprise resilience leaders, they stop being guardians of data and become stewards of continuity and trust. Over the next couple of slides, I want to show you how we've done that at North Standard. The first slide is a little theoretical. The second slide is going to go into a little bit more practical detail and maybe contain some points that you can take away and implement in your own organisations. So this is my favourite model. I love it. It's so sad I didn't have a favourite model. Value disciplines. And it's based on the fact that all firms can't be all things to all people. Great firms choose one value discipline and they excel in it and they maintain baseline in the other 2. Operational excellence, customer intimacy, and product leadership. So what I've tried to do is think like a CEO, put myself in the shoes of a CEO, and think about, if I'm operating in an operational excellence capacity, I'm going to be super, super interested in reliability, my commitments to the customer, and think about Jaguar Land Rover in that context, and how one weak link in the chain caused catastrophic cascading consequences. FMCG firms is another good example of that. Customer intimacy, I want to be trusted in the safe and secure handling of customer data. So the industry that I work in, Lloyd's of London, I remember talking to one of the chief underwriters there, a chap called James Connell, very traditional London market guy, dicky bow tie, Church's loafers. And he said to me, Declan, I know within 10 feet of someone coming up to me in the box whether we're going to do business or not. And I said, well, how? He said, it's based on trust. You know, has this person demonstrated to me credibility, reliability? Is he self-interested? Can I share with him intimately? And if that's not there, the business ain't there. And it dawned on me that actually what we do is we transfer those human-based behaviours into digital environments. Product leadership. So here we're talking clearly about new markets, you know, adoption and stability being key and being not becoming a blocker towards innovation. I was trying to think of a good example of this. I got an invoice the other day from my tailor from using the Revelate payment platform, and I paid the bill in 2 clicks of a button. I thought it was fantastic. I did a little research into Revolut. I think they're less than 10 years old, US-based payments platform, very innovative, real growth firm. They've not been without their fair share of cyber attacks and data breaches. So in every case, resilience affords us an opportunity to gain strategic advantage, and it should be seen as a cost and not an ingredient of success. And we can focus on connected systems, data, and new environments. So if you haven't talked to your CEO or your executive team about your own firm's value proposition, have this conversation and look at these areas which you can use to inform and develop your own cyber resilience strategy. Ultimately, resilience shouldn't be seen as a side project. It should be seen as a foundation on which strategy, trust, and innovation are built. So the next slide, I'm going to show you how we've embedded a unified framework bringing together cyber, operational resilience, and supply governance. 3 disciplines that are often separate, but in reality inseparable. So I'll just pick out some highlights from each section. In cyber risk and information security, we don't actually run the SOC. The SOC is run by IT, a very skilled, capable team focused on delivery and execution. We focus on GRC. This is not just about policies and audits. This is about insight, making better decisions, reducing risk, and building a culture of trust. So we actually use our technology risk management framework and provide oversight and assurance at the first line, outside of technology, to ensure effective controls. This allows us more time to focus on cultural development, proactive threat-led penetration testing, key activities like preparing for a ransomware negotiation or developing an incident response retainer or working out what our crisis incident commander role would look like. The middle section is around operational resilience. This is where we look for robust and dependable services, identifying what is critical, testing, and leading exercises beyond technology that cover financial, operational, and reputational impact. And finally, supplier governance ensures that we can leverage partners and platforms in a safe manner and that we have resilience built into those partnerships. So all supplier relationships come through my team, from MGAs and binding authority agreements in Lloyd's to ICT vendors, cloud partners, SaaS platforms, even the company that provides the pens and papers into the office. I think Daniela mentioned earlier a funny anecdote about sending a 170-page due diligence questionnaire to the suppliers of pens and pencils. We don't do that. We act in a proportionate way, and that's very much the beauty of being able to channel those engagements through the team. Due diligence, looking at stuff like exit planning, concentration risk, etc. All of this is done with a single goal: protecting trust, reputation, and continuity. And of course, ensuring regulatory compliance and that executive risk reporting is effective across the function. So I'm going to bring all of this together now, and hopefully we'll have a couple of minutes for some questions. But before I do that, I just want to talk quickly about how you would build an enterprise resilience function within your own company? Firstly, you have to be able to empower your resilience leaders. And this will only come when you have a progressive thinking, confident C-suite. Many of the activities that I showed on the previous slide, certain people might not want to let go of those, but confident leaders will see the benefit in what you're trying to achieve. There's a very famous saying from Gina Rometty, who was the first female CEO of IBM: growth and comfort do not coexist. And when we've been on this journey this has evolved over the last 3 or 4 years. There has been an element of discomfort. There has been some friction, but we've landed in a good place now. And I'm now in a position where we have our own budget for this. We have a reporting line and accountability outside of technology. We have a seat at the risk committee. In many organisations, larger organisations, you might have heard of chief resilience officers, board level roles. And I think these roles are very, very relevant and necessary in some cases, given that we're not talking about pure tech here. Enterprise resilience is about visibility, agility, and preparedness, ultimately before the storm hits. So just to close off, we began by talking about the Dali, which was a single failure which resulted in a massive multi-billion-dollar impact. And we agreed that we need to start getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. We saw that resilience is about anticipating disruption before it hits. We discussed there are turning tides around leadership awareness, diversity, and board-level engagement. We agreed that shifting from cybersecurity to enterprise resilience is about moving from purely prevention to anticipation, response, and recovery. We have evolved the CISO role from a guardian to a strategic leader, a leader that is fluent in business risk, a leader that is fluent in supply chains and fluent in crisis management. We've learned to think like a CEO, aligning resilience with strategy in order to achieve competitive advantage. And finally, we've discussed how to build an enterprise resilience framework into one coherent model that protects trust and enables growth. Because the next disruption will come, and when it does, resilience won't just be technical, it will be the defining mark of true leadership. Thank you.